Welcome back to episode 2 of The Bits with Joe and Nick. I'm Nick from Bitewing Games.
I'm Joe from Allplay Games.
And today we're excited to talk all about conventions, which, Joe, you've been to many more conventions than I have. So this is going to be more of an interview almost than a discussion, although there's been a few I've been to, so I can give a little bit of input here and there.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I know Bitewing you've done some conventions, right? As like kind of more or less like a first timer, like Gamma, and then also you did PAX Unplugged for your second year. Well, I did a quick count, and Allplay is going to be attending 28 conventions this year in some way, shape, or form. So,
wow.
It's
is that 2024 or 2025?
2025.
Wow.
On our books, we have 28 conventions that we're planning on attending.
That's crazy.
Again, in some way, shape, or form. A lot of these are not huge, big endeavors. Some of them are actually like our presence is quite small and minimal. But in general, Allplay will have a presence at 28 unique conventions across the calendar year, because that is a huge part of what Allplay does. And so I think it's kind of fun because we decided to format this episode a bit differently and kind of look at it from the perspective of like you, who definitely have been to some conventions, but have I would say a lot smaller experience in terms of like running a booth at conventions and what you're trying to get out of conventions other than like show up and hope things go well. To like me, who like conventions are such a core part of what our marketing strategy is all about and what we do as a company, that we're kind of formatting this more like an interview, because I don't have any notes in front of me. I kind of I'm going into this very blind, and all of my answers are going to be very much off the cuff. So
great. Yeah. And I think, for a lot of publishers about our size, most of us have day jobs, right? And so then it becomes difficult to take time off, which I spend vacation days to go to conventions, which do not feel like a vacation, although they are fun. So yeah, when you're a bigger company like Allplay, or when you're a full-time employee of a publishing company at the very least, then, it makes sense to go to many more conventions, especially if they are profitable, which I don't think they always are for publishers for various reasons. But yeah, I want to get into the Allplay strategy of conventions and such, because I feel like after going to a few conventions where Allplay has been there, I feel like you have one of the best booths consistently at every convention that I go to. And as far as attendee engagement and sales, and just your booth is just hopping all the time, which is definitely what you want, right?
We try. We work really hard on our convention presence. We are always, in fact, PAX Unplugged, we drove the trucks into the convention, and all the way from Kansas City to Philadelphia. And on the way back, me and my sales guy, Mark, who helps me run my conventions, talked all the way home about what we can do better in 2025 for conventions. And I mean, that's a big part of it, is just always looking for ways to improve, and not just saying, well, this is how it goes and this is what it is.
Absolutely. So I guess to start off, what do you feel is the point of conventions, and what do you feel is helpful about conventions for board game publishers?
So conventions are a conundrum, I think, for a lot of publishers. They feel that they need to be there, but a lot of them lose a lot of money by going to them, especially when they're smaller companies. And that can be a very frustrating situation. In fact, there's a lot of companies that maybe would be happy to attend for just the ability to go, but then certain conventions like Gen Con, you can't even get a booth at or have a presence at. So it's a very difficult situation for a lot of publishers to wrap their mind around conventions. So really, I can only speak to what my feelings are and to what Allplay's feelings are when it comes to, or how Allplay as a company looks at conventions. But I can at least touch on somewhat of like how maybe other people might see it. But overall, conventions are and always will be a marketing endeavor. That the conventions are one of the best ways to market your product. There are a lot of sales strategies. There are a lot of marketing strategies out there, but overall, conventions are where you are going to interact with your audience in a very real and very dynamic way. You are going to engage new customers. You are going to engage fans of your brand. You are going to have touch points so that when you have future things, in the works, you're going to be able to like that. They're going to be able to like have positive impressions, hopefully, of interacting with your company at a convention, going to shows. And again, we're doing like 28. So like our shows that we go to run the gamut. Like we have a presence at shows as small as like 600-700 people, all the way up to, you know, Gen Con, or Essen, which I think is one of the biggest shows in the world, making sure that Allplay is well represented at all of these shows. So, but first and foremost, it's really about marketing, because that marketing of being able to interface directly with your customers is always going to be the primary focus and primary reason a publisher should and want to attend a convention.
Yeah, that's something that we felt strongly at Bitewing Games this past year. Is we've worked pretty hard to find fans and kind of spread awareness of what we're doing, at least online, right, in places like Board Game Geek and Reddit and beyond. But we haven't been able to go to as many conventions for the reasons I mentioned, and it feels like there's a whole different genre of people who go to conventions versus people who are regulars on Board Game Geek, especially locals, right? Whatever region that you're in, people are going to go to, if they're into board gaming, they're often going to go to whatever convention is most close and convenient for them to reach. And so being able to be there when they show up and present your games to them feels like a really key element to build fans.
And now, building a fan base on Reddit, or building a fan base on Discord, or building a fan base on BGG costs zero money. So every publisher should be working to do those as much as possible. Mm-hmm. And also, there's a lot of gamers that will never, ever go to a convention, that's just not something that they care about, not something that they're interested in at all. But I do think a vast majority of gamers would like to attend a convention. It might not always be in the works or available for them, but I do think that there's a lot of people that are never going to attend a convention. So building community outside of conventions is very important, but it is one of the few places that you will get to interact in a physical, face-to-face way with the customer base of board gaming in general.
And so one of our first conventions that we went to as a partner of Allplay, and being able to kind of collaborate with you, Joe, when you were there and get your feedback on how we should set up our booth, was actually PAX Unplugged 2023. And this was an interesting show for us, because up to that point we hadn't really shown up to a convention to officially sell games. And at this convention, we managed to get your feedback on kind of how we should set up our booth. And it was different from kind of, I think, the normal average typical setup of like a very small booth of most exhibitors. When I think of like an exhibition booth at a convention, I think of people having like their tables set up at the front all along the walkway where people are walking by. And then the booth people are behind the tables, and there's like this major separation between the people who are running the booth and the people who are walking up to the booth, the attendees, right? But you kind of changed my thinking about this when we initially set up that booth back in 2023. Do you want to talk about kind of your philosophy for how a booth should be set up and what it should look like, whether it's a bigger Allplay sized booth or a smaller 10 by 10 foot booth?
So I have a lot of thoughts on this, and this is incredibly important for us. Our entire thought process when it comes to setting up our booth, right, is we want people to feel like they are invited into our booth, right? We want people to feel like they can walk into our booth. So that means we do not put tables up along the walkway to keep people out. We put demo tables up around the walkway. We also don't keep the product behind us so that people have to ask for product. We want people to be able to grab the product. And I've heard some publishers say, oh, how much stuff do you think gets stolen off of those shelves at conventions? And I'm like, probably less than you think. And
Yeah.
honestly, I don't really care. Like, honestly, if that's your biggest worry at a convention is like a handful of people walking off with a game, then I don't really know what to tell you, because I just don't think it happens that much. And we do our best to try to like have people watching and looking and stuff like that. But really, they're there to help and assist. They're not actually there to stop, shoplifting or whatever. But like, I don't think it happens that much. I think what's going to generate more sales is when people can like literally like benefit from touching the product, seeing the product, not have like remove the barriers, right? Remove the barriers that keep people from getting to your product, getting to your demos, and prioritize having as many demos as you can versus having as much sales space as you can. In fact, one of my friends works for a very large publisher as well. And she got put in charge of conventions. And she's like, Allplay is amazing at conventions. I want to learn. Tell me what to do. And I told her, I was like, your booth at PAX Unplugged, probably one of the worst booths I've ever seen in my life. Because when I walked up to their booth, and I'm not going to name names, but like it was just a giant counter, right? Just a giant counter. And all of the product was on shelves behind this counter. So people had to walk up to the booth, interact with a human, right? And be like, they can't, like, they're like, can I see that game? Which at that point, they're like, they feel like if they don't feel 100% sure that they want to buy it, they're not going to ask to see it. But if they can just grab it and touch it and look at it and decide they don't want to buy it and put it back, that's fine. But even if they were going to buy it or not, they're probably not even going to ask for it if they don't feel 100% certain that they're going to buy it. And then behind that was like two itty bitty little demo tables in like a very large booth. And that was it. And they just had like two demos of the same game going on. And I was like, you could fit like 5 times as many demos in this booth, but you've like prioritized having this giant counter, having all of this product on shelving behind the counter. Like you've put so many barriers for all of the people. And I told her this, and she was like, okay, great. I totally will take that feedback. And honestly, their booth at Gen Con and PAX Unplugged this year, much better. It was full of people playing games. They reduced the amount of space that they were taking up with their demo tables. They really made it so that they could put as much gaming into that area as they could. And they created more of a store that could be walked into where you can grab your product as opposed to a counter with shelving. So again, like this is my philosophy: is minimize the sales space, maximize the demo space, and make it so that there are no barriers to your product.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, any person who's been to a convention and kind of walked past a bunch of booths, has this fear, this worry of getting like reeled into a conversation about a game that they don't care about, or like somebody trying to pitch to them a whole game that they weren't there to hear about, or it's just not their type of game. I think that's probably happened to all of us. So I don't think many attendees want to, like, first thing when they walk up to a booth is get into a long conversation with somebody. They'd rather just interact directly with the games that are on display, or just walk up to a demo table. And if the demo table says like, oh, this takes like 20 minutes or 5 minutes, be able to just jump into a game and start playing it if it catches their eye. Right. And so that's ability to just directly interact and pull a game off of the shelf or off the table and look at and learn about it more, is much more inviting, I think, to folks than forcing people to communicate with whoever is running the booth.
Yeah, I think so. And, sometimes those face-to-face interactions are great. And, that's why we'll generally have some people circulating the sales area. So if they do see somebody that looks like they have a question, they can be like, hey, do you have any questions about that? Can I help you with that? Let me know. Right. As opposed to a very like high pressure, be like, hey, let me like drag you into this very long drawn out demo or like this long drawn out explanation of my game. Right. And again, different things work for different people, but I just do not feel like that's going to be the best way to get your product in front of people.
Yeah, and one thing that really stood out to me after seeing how your booth was set up and run was that Allplay was one of the few booths, at least last year, from my observation, that had demo tables where people stood around them instead of sat around them. And I can see the logic there when you have games that play usually in like 20, 30 minutes, right? And how much space you save by not having chairs just all over the place in your booth.
And now, I don't think this would work very well for a lot of companies, right?
Yeah,
you're not going
right.
to stand to demo terraforming Mars.
Yeah.
But for Allplay, we're able to work it a little bit better. We try to keep the tables at a reasonable height so that they're comfortable to stand at, but as well as people that might have mobility issues with scooters and stuff like that, we try to work hard to make sure that people could still sit on a scooter and play, which is something that happens quite a bit. And especially even at smaller and larger conventions, we also have separate demo areas where we do have seated areas for people to play at. So we usually, at the larger conventions, we'll run a separate booth called the event booth, or at Gen Con, it's a room. And then at the small shows, we'll actually have like one or two tables in the demo area where people can demo our games as well. So we do try to make sure from an accessibility standpoint that we're not like limiting people that cannot stand for a long time. But we do feel like our philosophy when it comes to like putting demos into our booth is like we cram as many demo tables as we possibly can fit into the booth. And then we add two more. So that's kind of what we have always said our philosophy is like fill every square inch to the maximum amount with demo tables and then find a way to shove two more in. So that's kind of the way that we go about it. But I honestly, I love our booth setup. I love what we do with it. Again, it's like if you're trying to run a small convention or you're a small board game company and you're trying to go to a convention, like don't like we own a furniture company, right? Like we make tables, right? So like all of our shelving and all of our demo tables that everyone's like, oh, these are so nice. Oh my goodness, this is amazing. I'm like, that works very specifically for our company. But we're also starting to see, and I love them to death and I'm not mad about it, but like we're starting to see like imposters pop up. And imposters is actually a wrong word. Let's just say like loving copycats of like what we do with our booth, and that's totally fine. Like I'm really good friends with the people over at Bezier, and they are now doing the same thing where they have like the little signs over the demo table. And again, we don't own a patent on this or whatever. But they're doing that because they're like, yeah, we sell a lot of little card games, and this is a great way to get people to play them. So they saw what we were doing, and they figured out a way to do it for themselves. Absolutely phenomenal. We don't have a patent on people standing at a table to play a game, but we just happen to be able to make some really nice demo tables that work really well for that model. And then we're starting to see some other people come up with a concept that will work well for their company and their games. So again, don't try to I would not suggest any company that's starting out to be like, oh, we have to go buy tens of thousands of dollars in like custom furniture and tables and stuff like that. That is not the answer, but we have invested heavily over the years in what we feel like is the optimal booth setup for Allplay. And even so much so that we have been able to replicate that and have almost the exact identical booth presence in Essen as well. So we actually have like an entire duplicate set of booth stuff, shelves, tables, everything that goes over to Essen.
Yeah, I think most importantly, the general philosophy is what most publishers should take away as far as, let people enter your booth, let them engage with your games, and let them touch and interact with the products, right? And we noticed a big difference in 2023 PAX Unplugged when we had our first booth. It was a 10-foot by 20-foot booth. And because it was our first time there, we were like secluded to the very, furthest walkway of the entire hall, like up against the wall. And there weren't a ton of publishers over by us either. It was a lot of like very supplemental, accessory type board game stuff. What was interesting was, most of those booths in that whole walkway of ours did not let people into their booth. It was just like set up on the table in front. People could walk along the walkway and look at their stuff, but they would pass right by within, 10 seconds, they'd be on to the next booth, right? Our booth was one of the few that let people walk in and stand around a table and demo a game. And it was interesting to see the contrast of 15 or 20 people surrounding just 3 of our demo tables and interacting with our games and staying there for 30 minutes or more. And then sometimes playing another game and bringing other people in, and they'd be like, I'm going to teach this one. And it was cool to see how every demo that we had some pretty hot games at that convention, but every demo that we sold at least 1 or 2 copies of those games, which was really fantastic for us. That was, I think, a very big game changer. The fact that people could come in and interact with the product before they bought it. So.
Yeah, I think the more people that can play your game, the more opportunities you're going to have to sell that game. I'm not going to really get a whole bunch of people to buy my game if I'm just standing at a booth with a game and being like, hey, let me tell you about this. Hey, let me tell you about this. Hey, let me tell you about this. Maybe if I'm a great salesman, I can do that. But I'm going to get far more people to be able to buy my game because I'm like, hey, do you want to try this? Do you want to do a demo? Do you want to see this game? And they can actually walk up, play it. There's no sales pressure at that point. You're just demoing, right? That's why we keep the demo space and the sales space pretty separate from our stuff. We're demo, whatever, walk in, demo. Somebody in a blue vest, a blue Allplay vest is going to teach you a game. And then if you just walk away, we're not going to know if you go buy it or not. It's a very low pressure sales situation in our booth because it is play our games, play our games, play our games, play our games. And we feel that translates very well to people buying the games. And now there are always a bunch of people that just come running to buy, don't really care about demoing at all because they're there to shop. But there's a lot of people that I feel don't know who we are. Maybe they just get caught of interest in one of the demos that's out and they're like, oh, I want to try this. And they play it and they go, this is great. And I have watched at some conventions, I love it. People go from one of our demo tables to another one, to another one, to another one, to another one. And then I see them with an armful of games with a $300 purchase. And they walk up to the booth and we're just wow, they must have really enjoyed those. And then they're usually shopping and they're like, oh, tell me about this one, or tell me about this one, or is that one at one of the tables? I'm like, oh no, I'm sorry, we're not demoing that one here. And they're like, oh, well, tell me about it. I want to know about this one, right? And it's just really cool because at that point I'm like, I have a new fan, right? Allplay has gained a new fan, which is great.
Yeah, I think that's the hope when, especially for us in these recent conventions, at this very recent PAX Unplugged, we had only expensive product to sell, only deluxe copies. I think our cheapest product that we were demoing and selling was $40, which isn't ideal when a lot of people, have a budget, right? And if it's a $20 or less game, then it's almost a no-brainer. If they like it, they're just going to buy it. But then when they demo Trailblazers and they're like, oh, this is really cool. How much is it? And we only have the deluxe edition to sell and it was $75. They're like, oh, okay. So not everybody is, has quite the budget to be buying these bigger things, but if they can at the very least play and enjoy your game, then they had a good experience at your booth, right? And that company is much more likely to be on that person's radar for future Kickstarter campaigns or future conventions, things like that, where they look back and think, oh yeah, I remember playing that one game at this publisher's booth and having a really good time with it. That's going to be much more memorable than if they just walk by and look at what's on your shelf for sale and then keep walking. So
one of the pieces of advice I would give to smaller publishers, right, is conventions are tough. They really are, especially when you're a smaller company and you're in a room with a bunch of giant companies, right? Sometimes I, feel bad for the people at 10 by 10s that are right next to Allplay, right? Trying to compete with this just sea of demo tables where people are playing and lines wrapped around the shelves and everything. And I can get sometimes it can feel discouraging in your little 10 by 10 with your table and but the thing is, right? Every company has to grow. And if you feel like conventions are a good strategy for your company to grow, then you kind of have to show up. But one thing I will say is it is very hard in the board game industry to turn a profit with a single game. It is very difficult to make a convention work, to make distribution work, to make really any sales strategy work with a single title. And there are exceptions. I know there are exceptions. But as a board game publisher, if your goal is to like grow your brand and grow your presence, you need to grow your product catalog, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's a kind of a difficult endeavor. Like it's a difficult thing. And you need to have product that will attract a broad audience, right? And if that's not what your goal is, that's totally fine. But I think that it is an important thing to understand that if you just have one title, it's very hard to go to a convention and get enough people interested in that one game that it's going to offset the cost of attending that convention. Going to conventions like PAX Unplugged or Gen Con are extremely expensive. They're extremely cost prohibitive. In fact, many very large companies have a loss at those types of conventions. Okay. Allplay does not. I will say that right now. Like I feel very strongly about how I feel about that type of mentality. But there's a lot of very large companies that do not mind losing money at a convention. Again, I have my own feelings on that. But if you're a small company with one title, it is a very difficult proposition to show up to a convention of any size and turn a profit on a single game. So know that going in, right? Know that going in, if you just are going to start doing conventions and you have a single game, it is going to be a difficult proposition unless your game is extremely popular and extremely hot to be able to turn a profit in that way.
Absolutely. Yeah. So what we've noticed from being at a couple conventions is it helps to have not only a variety of products, but a variety of price points, if possible. You know, not everybody's going to opt for the $60 or $70 game that you're selling. It's just not within their budget, and maybe not the type of game that they even play. So I know that doesn't always work. Some publishers have a very narrow brand, and they're very consistent about the type of game they put out. But if you're open to, you know, a wider variety, it's much easier to sell, you know, a $15 or $20 game at a convention, right?
Yeah. And kind of on that note, right? If depends on the speed at which you're able to make product, right? Allplay prints like 15 to 20 games a year. So by the time we go to like Dice Tower West again this year, there's going to be at least 15 new titles that the people that were at Dice Tower West have not seen at a like they have. Like if you go to Dice Tower West and that's your convention you go to, and you bought games from Allplay last year and you came to our booth and bought a whole bunch of stuff, I will have 15 new things for you to buy next year, like within one calendar year, right? And again, I'm talking very specifically about Allplay, but like if you just are doing one game and it's like multiple years before you're able to get another product to market, and conventions are a part of your strategy, and you're going to the same convention over and over again, and you just don't ever have new product, you are shrinking considerably your ability to sell over and over and over again. There are some, I'm honestly impressed with them to a degree, but there are some companies that I'm like, that company is at every show, every Gen Con, every PAX, every Origins, and they just have the one game, and they're just like every show, they're just like, yeah, it's this game. And I'm like, I cannot believe that they're still like finding more like audience for that thing. But like, that's the thing is like you can't attract the same audience over and over again with the same product. Right. And so again, I'm not trying to dictate how different publishers run their board game companies, but what I am saying is if you want conventions to be a profitable, successful endeavor, having deep product and being able to have product turnover so that you can have new product is very important. And that does not mean abandon the old product as soon as the new product comes in, because that's also bad, right?
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is you need to start building your catalog. The more you build your catalog, the more successful things like conventions specifically will be.
Yeah, we noticed this very thing happen between our last two PAX shows, right? So PAX 2023, Zuvadis had just gotten like rave reviews from folks like Shut Up and Sit Down and the Dice Tower. And so people came into that show like, okay, I want to play Zuvadis, or just straight up, I want to buy it right away. And so we sold out of Zuvadis in a day and a half. Less than a day and a half. And so looking at that, we were like, okay, this game is demoed really well. People who play it are buying it and they're loving it. And, it was selling really quickly. So this next packs, we're going to bring, almost twice as much product. The problem with that mentality was that a lot of the folks who came to our booth and bought it in the previous year were also at the next convention, and they didn't need it at that point, right? Or people had a whole year to track down a copy of Zuvadis if they really wanted it. And so by PAX 2024, there wasn't nearly as much demand, and it still sold pretty well, but we brought way too much product for Zuvadis and games like that, where in our mind it was like, okay, let's make sure we have enough so we don't sell out again. But you have to account for, as time goes on, people are going to be less buying of that particular game, right?
Yeah, like we bring a lot of product to shows, but like some of our older titles, like On Tour, that was our very first game we ever make, we bring like 12 copies, right? Like it's not, and like we don't even sell them all, right? Like we're not, like it's just there because it's there. And the way our booth is set up, it makes it really easy to do that kind of thing. But like certain titles feel very evergreen. Like I'm always going to sell a huge amount of Mountain Goats. I'm always going to sell a huge amount of Kabuto Sumo at every convention I go to. So there's some things that like be doing this for a very long time and getting consistent like documentation on what sells at what shows. Like I know pretty much predictably what I'm going to bring. The big wild card is the new games, right? Like what feels really, really good is selling out of your product at like Sunday, an hour before the hall closes. That's like the best feeling in the world, because it's like, I nailed it. Yeah. The worst feeling in the world is running out of product on like Friday morning, like 2 hours into the convention, right? And being like, wow, I have so much missed potential, right? So this is like a question I actually get from smaller publishers all the time, is like, how much product should I bring to a show, right? And I'm like, that is a difficult question for me to answer. So the answer should be whatever quantity that you feel you would be very happy with selling enough, but like realistically think that you aren't going to be like bringing so much, right? Because it's expensive to bring stuff to shows. In fact, we make it incredibly affordable for our partners to bring stuff to shows. But for a lot of people that like want to ship a pallet, like companies that ship their pallets in often are spending upwards of like $6,000 for a pallet of product, right?
Wow. Yeah.
That's insane. Cause like, maybe it's a little bit less. I might be way over exaggerating that actually, because I'm thinking of actually what it costs to airship a pallet from China, which is incorrect costs. So, but I think you could easily spend $2,000. Yeah. Like it probably costs like $600-700 just for the shipping. And then oftentimes these like conventions will like charge a ton to receive the product and to take it to your booth. Like some companies that do it that way, again, I'm not going to dictate the amount of work you do, but like Allplay is thrifty. Right? Like Allplays thrifty. We're getting trucks, right? In fact, we just got so big that we had to get our DOT regulation for like bringing trucks to conventions. Oh, wow. So we're in a whole paperwork mess right now. It's really fun. I told Chad, I'm like, I feel like we might be one of the only companies that like board game companies that is like legit has like a DOT regulation, like, and is like following the laws as far as transporting product nowadays. Cause I just thought that was really funny to me that we were doing that. Right. It just made me laugh. So anyways, yeah, we drive our product to conventions, because it costs like the amount of product that we want to bring to a convention would easily cost me $10,000-15,000 to ship it all in. Right. Cause I'm probably shipping, if I palletize it all, and that's like, I have to account for the furniture. I'm probably shipping like 20-25 pallets worth of product to a show like PAX Unplugged, which is insane. Or I can get 2 Penske trucks for $2,000 each and like $500 in gas there and back. And I'm like, great. I showed up to the show. I spent like $6,000-7,000. And yeah, I don't know. Like I look at things very differently, because like my goal is ultimately to turn a profit at a convention. And so I look at every feasible way that that's going to happen. And honestly, like shipping all of my product to a convention is not the answer.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And these are helpful things to know. I do want to get into some more of your like pro tips for publishers as far as what they can do to kind of make the most of a convention. Obviously not everybody is going to be able to have like custom built demo tables or a custom built shelving units for displaying their games. But we managed to, do pretty well we did have some demo tables that we bought from Allplay, admittedly, but those worked well for us, but we don't have like shelving unit to sell our games. So we just more classically pile them on a table for folks to handle and buy off the table. But one thing I'm curious about is you and other, it seems like bigger publishers, once they get to a certain size booth, will have these huge banners hanging over their booth, right? And my question is like, at what point is that worth doing, and what is involved in that? Is that something you have to like take to a convention, and then the convention folks set it up for you, or how does that all work?
So it packs up pretty small, and different conventions are different. So like PAX Unplugged, they'll build it for you. Essen's actually great because they'll let you raise it yourself. They just have like a pulley system, and you just hook it on and pull it up yourself, and then they come by and hang the chain later when everyone's gone. So like every convention's different. Like Gen Con, you can't use your own rigging. They have to use their own special rigging. It's all different, right? And I don't try to like integrate with that. But as far as like what that the hanging signs, that's like a big one, right? So first thing I would say is the hanging sign itself is pretty darn expensive. Like we have like a double sign that we usually do, and those two signs together probably cost like $3,500 in terms of just like buying them, right? Now the cost to hang them is usually not very expensive. It's usually like a $500 hanging fee, right? That you will set up just like you would when you're like requesting power at your booth or anything else. So like those fees are all kind of like when you're signing up for the convention, and you'll like have check boxes like, do you need power? Do you have a hanging sign? Yada, yada. And that will put you on the schedule, and that will be added to the cost of what you pay for that convention. As far as, is it worth it? TBD, right? I think it's more of one of those, it kind of feels like almost like one of those, like, because, okay, so here's the one thing I know. You are not allowed to have a hanging sign at most conventions unless your booth is of a certain size. Yeah. Right. So you have to have a certain size booth in order to have a hanging sign. Because if they let every 10 by 10 have a hanging sign, you just have like chaos. They'd just be all crammed together, right? It'd be insane, right? So you have to have a certain size booth to have one anyway. So like getting a hanging sign almost feels like a rite of passage as a publisher. I remember when we bought our first one and like got it hung, and it was a brand new thing for us, that like I just watched that sign go up, and I was like, yeah, we're one of these guys now. Yeah, we got a sign. Because like I think when you're a smaller company and you look around at like the hanging signs, you're like, well, of course they have one, and of course they have one. And sometimes you're like surprised, and you're like, oh wow. There was a company at Gen Con that just like cracked me up, because they just had this like, everyone like, because like our thing was like, we're like, they're like, how big do you want it? I'm like, how big can you make it? Like that was the question, is like, what's the maximum that you can do, right? And then within reason, like made a choice for the size that we wanted our banner to be at. But like I feel like a lot of companies try to have these like huge, gigantic banners, right? Because it's a sign, right? It's marketing, right? Yeah. People know where your booth is. But the other thing is, at Gen Con, there was just this like company that was like pretty close to us, and they had like the teeny tiniest little round sign, and it almost made me be like, what was the point? Like, it's like, it's almost, you can't even see it. And when you do, you can't even read what's on it. Cause it's like, I feel like they almost accidentally put the dimensions in wrong. You know, like we're like, okay, like gave it to them in inches, and when they were asking for feet, because it was so small that you could, like, you had to like walk around it to actually read what it said. And I was just like, I feel like there was a mistake made here when somebody decided to pay for this and then also pay to have it hung. Because I'm like, I don't know that it's doing you any favors. But anyways, I digress. That's more of an anecdote rather than anything. And again, not dogging on the publisher. It's fine. I just thought it was a really funny thing to like at Gen Con be like, that's weird.
Well, yeah, it's funny. I noticed myself at this last convention just walking around the hall and using the signs up above to kind of navigate the hall or to find specific, bigger publishers, right? So I feel like it can definitely help to have something for people to find you if you grow to be that size, I suppose. And it kind of psychologically establishes like, oh, this is a must visit booth almost, because it's got the big sign above. But noticeably one thing about your sign from this most recent PAX is advertising of the board game bags. One thing that was funny for us is when we had people buying even just one game, but sometimes usually more games, they would ask us, do you have a bag that we can carry this in? And every time we're just like, oh, we probably should have, because we're having a lot of people ask for bags from us. We even had one customer who, I don't know if he even came back, but he came on Saturday and he had like $200 worth of products of our games that he was ready to buy. And then he's like, do you have something I can carry this in? And we're like, nope. And then he's like, okay, I'll come back tomorrow. And then I don't know if he came back. So looking back on this most recent convention, it was like, shoot, should we have like little cheap tote bags for people who buy multiple games from us, and should those be branded? I know you guys actually sell more official, fancier, more durable, bags, but do you have like smaller tote bags for people to carry stuff, and what does that look like?
Yeah, so this is like a difficult proposition, to be honest with you. So usually when people are buying, and like oftentimes like at Allplay, it's not uncommon for people to buy a armful of stuff, right? Like we have games, we have lots of them, and they're pretty inexpensive. Yeah. And so it's not uncommon for someone to buy like 8 to 15 products from us, right? Which is fantastic. But a lot of times people will be like, do you have a bag? And our answer is like, well, we have bags, right? Because they're like all over the outside of the booth and they're advertised and there's pricing. And we're not trying to necessarily make it an upsell, but also we sell very nice, high quality board game bags, right? Like we have a standard one for $35 at shows. We have a premium for $50. We have a rolling one now for $100. And then we also have like a lightweight bag that's like $7, right? So we have like all of these different types of board game bags that we sell. They're an actual product that we sell. Yeah. We kind of feel like it's like very not like within our brand to get to like have like a cheap takeout bag, like a plastic Walmart bag or whatever. And we also don't want to have like really cheap, like tote bags with like cheap handles, because we pride ourselves on making really nice, high quality bags. Yeah. And so like having like a cheap giveaway thing also doesn't feel great either. So one thing that we do is with our lightweight bags that we take to conventions, our $7 bag, we will often sometimes give one of those to someone that makes a purchase of over $100, right? Which usually means that they buy a lot of product. Or if there's somebody that buys like a big bundle or something. So like at this last convention, we were selling a all-in Kabuto Sumo bundle, and it was like $200, like $199. And if anybody bought that, we just were like, give it to them in a lightweight bag, because there's like it doesn't look good to be like carrying away all of that. But I feel like a lot of people just like buy a bag anyway, right? They're just buying bags from us. Yeah. And I like for us specifically, I don't mind that. I think a lot of companies have actually moved away. Like I think it used to be very popular 5 years ago for companies to have the like branded totes that they carry around. And you can get those made for like 50 cents, 60 cents or whatever. But like they don't sell outside of a convention. So I think a lot of companies stopped doing that because I don't see those very much anymore. I do see a lot of our bags. So, but I don't see a lot of people carrying around those like different totes from a lot of different companies. Some companies have like big, giant plastic bags that they carry stuff in, but it's just like it just depends on what you're trying to do. I definitely don't think it's a bad idea just to have like a cheap pack of like U-line plastic grocery bags if you want just something to give people that are buying multiple products. But as far as like branded totes go, it's a cost investment, right? Like you're already most people are discounting their product at conventions anyway. A lot of people are like, spending a lot to be there. Are you also going to invest in like things branded to carry your games in? And does it matter? Is it really affecting whether or not people buy it? I know anecdotally you brought up like one situation, but like I've seen people just walk away with like 15 games in their arms. They're like, yeah, I'll figure it out. I don't know. Whatever.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's an interesting challenge. We'll probably go with the cheap, plastic bag option, just so people have something if they really want, or if they buy too much stuff and they have no way to carry it. It's like that can be a barrier for a few people, but yeah, I don't think it was a big issue for most. So yeah, usually people are only buying one or two games at a time too. So that's helpful. Are there any other pro tips that you have for making the most of a convention, either as a publisher, or if we can get into this as well, as a designer or some other professional?
Okay, so I guess knowing what conventions are, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like I'll take a little bit of moment and just like talk about conventions as a whole, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of different types of conventions. There's conventions. So you have your major ones, right? And your major ones are going to be in the US, Origins, Gen Con, PAX Unplugged. Those are your three conventions where you're going to get the most people. The other conventions that you're going to be able to go to outside of the US are UK Games Expo and Essen, right? Then you have your, what I would call mid-size conventions. And again, Gen Con and Essen are gigantic in terms of like the other ones that were mentioned there, right? Like those are huge, right? But the other ones I would still consider like a larger convention. Then there's like your medium-sized conventions. And these I would put like Geekway to the West, Grand Con, Dice Tower East, Dice Tower West. These are like your more medium-sized conventions that are, they're generally going to draw a couple thousand people. They're a little bit regional. People treat them like regional shows. And so being able to go and exhibit, they usually have like a decent exhibitor hall. So being able to go to those conventions are generally a lot lower cost. And then you have your more regional cons, right? Like Great Plains Gaming Festival is one that we're going to be doing this year because it's just in Omaha, Nebraska, and it's like just like a couple hours away from us. So we're going to go support that. And then you've also got like Tantrum Con out in North Carolina. We like that show. We like the Tantrum House people. So we go and we'll attend that one. But like that one's not going to usually break more than like 1,200 people. But it's a nice regional show, and that's like a part of the U.S. that we don't really get to a lot, is kind of the Carolinas area. Other than that, like people have like really found some niche stuff, right? Like I talked to the guys at Grandpa Beck, and they go to one of their biggest selling shows is like this ancestry convention. It's this huge convention, this giant convention where it's all about like people that are interested in like finding out information about like ancestry stuff, right?
Yeah.
But they have like a pretty big exhibitor hall. And again, I don't even know what would be in that exhibitor hall, but there's Grandpa Beck slinging Skull King, right? And like be like, yeah, like, and he's like, yeah, it's great for us, right? I've heard a lot of people say that there's like this gigantic homeschooling convention that happens in Orlando, and they have like begged us to come to that one. They're like, oh, you would do so well. You would do so well. We've never really done a non-board gaming style show to see if that's actually worth it. And honestly, our schedule's so full that we don't have the opportunity to do like full-time conventions, which at this time, it kind of feels like we're almost doing that anyway. There's also other types of conventions. There's conventions that I attend that I have an Allplay presence at, but I'm not selling at, are things like Unpub or Proto ATL. Those are conventions where you can like, people are there to prototype and demo games, like demo their prototypes and test them. And I go to like scout for games that I might want to sign. And also I do like a couple of panels to provide information to people in that part of the industry. Other types of conventions are insider conventions, which I call insider conventions. But these are conventions that if you're just like a fan of board games, you can't really attend. So like Gamma Trade Show is for board game retailers and board game publishers, and other people in the industry can also be a part of it. But like it's a closed convention. You cannot just buy a badge and attend Gamma. This would also go for like Astra Toy Fair, New York Toy Fair, things like that. Like these are conventions. There's also ones like ACD Game Days and stuff like that. Like you can't just walk in as a person off the street because it is an insider sales show. B2B, right? Business to business, if you're unfamiliar with like that type of lingo. So yeah, there's like all types of conventions, all types of ways that you can like, as a publisher, support them. But those are kind of the ones that I look at. And I would say like these are the spectrum of conventions that you're going to be looking at, and whether or not you should attend them is really a difficult proposition as a publisher, because it really depends on what your goals are. Like if your goal is to sell a lot of games and you've made your first game and you're like, I'm going to go to Gamma, I would be like, please don't do that. Please do not go to Gamma in hopes that like, oh, I'm going to sell like 30,000 copies of my game to retailers. Like,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, you're going to get lost in the shuffle, and most retailers are not going to deal with you on a one-to-one individual basis. They're going to deal with a distribution model. In fact, a lot of the publishers that attend Gamma are not even selling directly to stores. They're just promoting their stuff so that when they go to a distributor, they can buy their games, right? Most people that attend there aren't actually selling games direct.
Right. Yeah, and Gamma especially is partially a networking convention as well, right? Where you meet other industry people and maybe end up doing some kind of business arrangement with them down the road. So yeah, you got to kind of know what type of convention you're getting into. Even conventions like Dice Tower West and Dice Tower East are primarily like playing conventions, right? And there is a selling area, and you guys have been able to be successful, but I think you've been one of the only publishers to turn a profit at a primarily playing convention. And I think that goes back to your philosophy of like, having affordable product, having new product consistently every convention, but also getting people actively, I don't know, playing the product and demoing it.
If I showed up to a convention and lost money, I would never go back to that convention again. And again, when you're just starting out, that's like a thing. But like at this point where Allplay is, if Allplay showed up to a convention, in fact, this year, we're going to test out our first non-board gaming convention. Here locally in Kansas City, there's a huge comic book convention. It's like the biggest comic book convention in the Midwest of the United States. It attracts like 25,000 people. Because it's in our backyard, we're going to try it. People always say, go to PAX East, go to PAX West. Those are video game conventions. Yeah. I don't feel like showing up as a board game publisher, especially with the cost. This one is a very low cost to get a booth, and it's also a very low cost to like show up and do what we're going to do. But I will say, if I do not turn a decent profit at that convention, I'm not ever going to go back. Like, I'm not going to just support the convention because I like those guys, right? Like, if I did not make money at Dice Tower Western, I'm one of the biggest sponsors of the Dice Tower at this current moment. But like Dice Tower West and Dice Tower East, if I don't make profit, right, at a show, I will not go back. And that's like my number one thing. And I think if you're a smaller publisher, you might have different goals, but I think your ultimate goal as a publisher should be that if conventions are part of your strategy, that conventions should be a profitable endeavor for you.
Yeah, and it takes time to get to that point where you have enough product and it's the right kind of product for a convention that it's easier to sell, right? And it's hard to track. If we're putting our games in front of people, it's hard to track. Are they becoming customers later on? So yeah, I think the ultimate goal should be to turn a profit. Maybe not initially, especially with a small product line, but hopefully you get to that point eventually. Otherwise, yeah, I hear even from big publishers. I think Leader Games once mentioned that conventions are like less than 1% of their total sales, and so it's almost not worth going. And obviously, that's a very different situation when you're Leader Games and you're still selling Root gangbusters and through retail and stuff. So I think you just have to figure out what works for your company, right, and what makes the most sense.
Yeah, and that's what I would say is like, Allplay is very dedicated to conventions and our convention presence. We invest a lot into it. We work really hard at it. We make a lot of money at conventions. I'll also just like let anybody listen to this know, like Allplay makes a lot of money at conventions on purpose. Like we work hard to do so. It didn't happen by accident.
Yeah.
But it's not like if we stop doing conventions tomorrow, it wouldn't really affect the bottom line that much because all of that together, we kind of just look at it as a marketing expense with a positive ROI, right? We just look at it as like if we had run an ad and that ad had generated a bunch of sales, we look at a convention the exact same way. So if we run the ad at a convention and it doesn't have a positive ROI, we're not going to run that ad again. You know what I mean? Like people in Milwaukee, not Allplay fans. Like, I don't know. Like, sorry, Milwaukee Game-a-thon. We showed up. We did our thing. Didn't do well.
Yeah, that's the truth of it. So you got to follow where the sales happen, right?
Mhm.
I guess a couple more things I wanted to bring up real quickly. I do often hear conventions, even ones that we don't attend, reaching out to us and being like, "Hey, will you donate library copies, or will you donate play to win copies, or do you just want to straight up sponsor our convention or do promotional material?" And obviously, you get that at conventions you're attending as well, as far as like, "Oh, do you want to pay for everybody to wear lanyards with your name on it, or pay for an advertisement hanging up in the hallways of the convention hall?" What are your thoughts about these kind of things, like library copies, play to win copies, sponsorships? Any in particular that stand out as like, okay, yeah, this feels more worth it, this feels less worth it?
Yeah, so I'll just speak about what I feel.
Mm-hmm.
I would never pay for advertising if I was not an in-person sponsor.
Sure. Yeah.
Like, I would never buy lanyards for a convention that I am personally not in attendance of as a exhibitor.
That makes sense.
But if I am, or anything like key cards, whatever. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I mentioned this before. Allplays thrifty, right? We're real thrifty. We're not spending a bunch of money to like post our games all over like windows and put it on floor decals and what like I consider all of that stuff stupid, right? I hate it, right? Things that I think are worth money. Lanyard sponsorships. And if you're attending a small show with me, good luck, because I've probably already claimed the lanyard sponsorship. At least I know I have for like Dice Tower East and Dice Tower West, right? But I will take any lanyard sponsorship I'll take if I am an exhibitor in attendance, because that is one thing that every single person at that convention is wearing, is so much name recognition, is so much brand recognition, and every single person is going to see that lanyard the entire time. And when they see your booth, they're going to go, "Oh, I've been sitting at a table playing games for 2 hours staring at that logo. I will go whatever." Put that logo on my hotel key card. What's that doing for me? Like, that's just like, I might as well just like take that money and throw it in the trash, take a picture of it and be like, "Hey, this is from Allplay." Like, I don't like, again, I feel strongly about some of this stuff, right?
Yeah,
I'm like, hotel key cards, really, guys, right? Stickers that go on the stairs, like, stickers that go on the bathroom mirror. I've never been in like the bathroom washing my hands, looked up and been like, "Oh, that game looks awesome. I should go check out that." Like, it's just, I feel very strongly that all of those things are absolutely ridiculous. And again, sometimes like at a place like Gen Con, we buy some of that stuff, like Jumbotron ads and whatever, but that's because we have to hit a certain threshold to be an event level sponsor, which gives us certain benefits and perks. So like, that's one of the few conventions that I'll actually spend stupid money at. And then sometimes like I am the main sponsor. So like I am the premier sponsor of Dice Tower East and Dice Tower West. And so like part of that premier sponsorship is like, they just like pour a bunch of stuff into that pool and be like, "Here, you can have this." Right. And like, sometimes they're like, "We're going to put your logo on the t-shirt." And I'm like, "Okay, whatever." Cool. Like, I don't care. Right. But like that's the way I feel about all of that stuff. Be like, "Oh, you're going to get like one banner wrap." And I'm like, great. I'm sure everybody that walks past that banner is going to be like, "Whoa, look at that Allplay logo. It's amazing." Like, it's all ridiculous, except for the exception that I do think it is very, one of the things that I would say is valuable that I have found is lanyard sponsorships, right? I think lanyard sponsorships can be valuable.
How about library copies and play to win copies, even for conventions that you're not attending?
I'll donate, because like, cost of goods is so small, right? Yeah. Like, it's not a big investment. But I will say this: play to win copies are 100 times more valuable than a library copy. If I go to the library at like some of these smaller, so I'll say this with exception: Dice Tower East, Dice Tower West, banging libraries, like some of the best in the country libraries, right? It's one of the reasons to go to either of those shows, because the library is like chef's kiss great, right? Yeah. The library at Tantrum Con is kind of a joke. And I can donate a bunch of games there, and I have, but like, nobody's going into the library and checking out games. People are like bringing games from home to play. Like, that's like, it's a
they're local, right? It's easy to bring because it's a small convention. You're not going to fly across the country to go to, probably not to go to Tantrum Con. So
the library is not the draw there, but play to wins get played 10 times over, maybe 50 times over what a library copy will get played. Play to wins are a very valuable thing. You're going to get a lot of people buying your game. Sometimes it's a little frustrating if you also show up as an exhibitor, because like if your play to win is like one of your hot new releases, everyone's going to wait to see if they win it before they actually come buy it if they liked it enough on the last day. So that's like one of the frustrating things about that. But I think a play to win is one of the more valuable things, because you will get way more people playing your game as a play to win than you will get them playing as a donation of a library copy.
Great. I don't know if you have anything else to cover aside from, I have one last topic just real briefly to cover, the favorite conventions of yours and what we love most about them. But if there's anything else you want to cover before we get to that, that's fine.
Nah, I'm happy to talk about, I'm happy to just dive in and let's just talk about my favorite conventions. I'm ready.
Cool. Yeah. All right.
I'm kind of going through, I have like a list of all the conventions that I'm going to be attending this year. So I'll kind of go through it. I think Tantrum Con is one of the best regional shows. It's put on very well. It's run very well. I think it's very low cost to be an exhibitor at, and there's a decent attendance size. I think if you're looking for a smaller show to attend and you're already, I would not go from California to North Carolina to exhibit at Tantrum Con. But if you're like within driving distance and you're a small publisher, I think being an exhibitor there is great. We tend to do pretty good sales there. Let's see here. Dice Tower West and Dice Tower East, in my opinion, are the two best smaller shows. The ones that I would say are under Origins, Gen Con, PAX Unplugged. Yeah. They are the best. You will make the most sales. You have to put effort in, but you will make the most sales. They support the exhibitors well. They're both run very well. They're great. I'm not trying to cause beef with the other ones. They're kind of in that tier, but I think that the Dice Tower conventions are like next level good. They have a great library. They support you, and the exhibitor hall is generally going to be very good compared to some of the other ones. And the sales, from what I've seen, are much higher. And I would even put BGG in that category. Like the sales at BGG Con, not nearly as good as Dice Tower East and Dice Tower West from my personal experience. And we're talking apples to apples, right?
Yeah.
Other shows, let's see here. I mean, I shouldn't bring up Tokyo Game Market because that doesn't really seem like an endeavor that most publishers that are listening to this feel like is going to be on their bucket list.
That's a very Allplay convention, right?
It's a very Allplay convention
for other reasons besides just sales. So
yeah. Let's see here. I'm very excited about UK Games Expo. This year will be our first year exhibiting there, but we are very excited about what that's going to do.
Yeah, that one's bigger than from what I'm hearing, it's a lot bigger than I thought it was, right? It's the second biggest convention in Europe. Is that right?
Oh yeah. It's honestly about the same size as PAX Unplugged.
Wow.
So they're boasting that they're going to have 40,000 attendees, which is pretty much what PAX Unplugged was at this year. So we're actually pretty excited about attending it. Cool. Piece of advice, shows like Astra, Chicago Toy Fair, New York Toy Fair. If you're a small publisher, do not go. Don't. It's a terrible idea. Because it's a toy and specialty show and games can be a part of that. But if you are not represented by rep groups in that field, you are not going to have people coming by your booth. And most of the people that might come by your booth because they're just walking around by themselves are going to be like, where can I buy your stuff? What rep groups can I buy your stuff through? It's a different industry. It's a different thing. I can't get into it really on this show. Do not think that it's a good idea for you to go to New York Toy Fair or Chicago Toy Fair or Astra unless you actually know what you're doing. Okay. Gen Con's amazing. And you know what? This is hot take. Gen Con is my favorite convention of all time. Gen Con is my absolute favorite convention of all time. In my opinion, Gen Con is the Super Bowl of board game conventions. That's what it feels like. It is every publisher in there, like literally on the gridiron, all of the hardcorest gamers. And I don't actually believe that because I know some people cannot attend conventions, and you going to Gen Con does not affect your love of board games in any way, shape, or form. I know. But it's like the people that go are like passionate about board games, right? Or just gaming in general. Yeah. And like when that show floor opens at Gen Con, Nick, you've never experienced a Gen Con, have you?
I've gone to Gen Con and but this was before Bitewing Games existed. Okay. I went as an attendee and I just remember the line to get a badge was like longer than the line to get into like any kind of Disneyland ride or whatever, like down the street, multiple blocks. It's insane how many people are there. We tried to get into Gen Con 2025, but they don't have enough space for us.
Yeah.
So that's a whole nother issue where I think they said they had more applicants this upcoming year than they've ever had. It was like almost 400 or something like that. And we were coming in as like, hey, we are one of the biggest Reiner Knizia publishers, who is one of the biggest designers in the world. We have 5 new releases we could sell at your convention, and they still didn't let us in. So it's like, how do you get into this convention at this point if you're a newer publisher to the industry? It seems like it's a hurdle.
I tell publishers, like, if you're trying to get into Gen Con, and that's a big goal of yours at this point, you're a smaller publisher, the only way to get in is to start coming and doing things that you can do that aren't exhibiting, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like running demos, running events, right? You can run events. They'll give you like 2 event tables and you can sell tickets to those events. And you can't sell a game there, but you can like run ticketed events. And you might be like, what a waste of money. Yeah, but you know who's going to get the booth next year is going to be the guy who decided it was worth it. Again, I'm not saying that should be your end goal, but if you're not at least making an effort, Gen Con's going to give it to the people that are making the effort, right?
Yeah.
And again, I hate it. Me and a bunch of big publishers talk about every year how frustrating Gen Con can be, yada, yada. And, you know, how we wish that they would give us bigger booths, yada, yada. And I know it's hard to look at a company that has a much bigger booth when you have nothing at a place like that and be like, why are you complaining about, right? But yeah, Gen Con's the Super Bowl, man. It's it's rough and tumble. It's just like you leave it like after Gen Con, you feel like you've left it all on the field, right? Like there's nothing left to give. Like you've squeezed every bit out of your company that you can. And some publishers have just been like, never going to be a part of that. Seems like a mess. And I can appreciate that. But man, I love it. I really love it.
And sales are really good. I mean, there's a reason it is in such high demand, because that's where people buy more than any other con, right? Maybe Essen can compare, but
I think Essen compares. But I'll talk about Essen real quick. So Essen is a very different kind of show. If you've done a lot of Gen Con, like if you've done Gen Con, Origins, PAX Unplugged, and then you show up to Essen, you're going to be surprised at how different Essen is. It's way more divided up. It's
into different halls, right?
Yeah, it's in different halls. People that come to Essen are shopping off of a list. And our demo tables are full, but we see, like at PAX Unplugged, we saw just like massive sales of all the games that we brought. Like huge sales potential for all the games that we brought. But we did not, but like at Essen, very small. Some, but very small, because people that come to Essen are buying off of a list, and like they'll come up and they'll be like, I need this game. And you're like, cool. Do you also want the expansion? And they'll look at their list and they'll go, no. Right. And I'm like, okay, like you're really excited about this game, but you don't want the expansion, because like that's just the way they come into it. Like most of the people that come are only there for one day. So like a lot of people in Europe like ride the train in, buy everything, take the train back home when they're done for that day, right? Like it's a very different type of culture, a very different type of thing, and it is buy. There are not events. There is not a big gaming hall that's open till 1 o'clock in the morning. At 7 o'clock, they come by and they kick everyone out and they go. And everyone goes and plays games at their hotels or whatever. But like, it's just, it is not like an American convention in any way, shape, or form. And it is shell shocking for companies to come for the very first time and be like expecting like, oh, I've done Gen Con. I know what a big convention is like. And they get to Essen and they're like, I have not made any sales. I'm like, yeah, did you have anything new and hot? Like, did you have anything in like the hotness? And they're like, no. And I'm like, yeah, you're not gonna sell anything at Essen. Like, sorry.
Okay.
Like that's like, you have to have something that's like new and hot. I think we did really well our first year because it was our first time going and we had a very big catalog. So a lot of people were like, oh, this is the first time we've actually had opportunity to buy Allplay games. Right. So that helped. But the next year, like it was just our hot titles. Like that was all like the hot titles were the ones that were selling. And everything else was very low compared to what we will usually see in those numbers.
So I'm going to ask you this eventually. I might as well ask you here. Like we're probably looking to go to Essen for our first time in 2025. If we can, assuming, I think they have more space than Gen Con does.
Yes.
So I assume it's going to be easier to get in. But we're not going to have our demo tables with us, right? And we're going to have, some new releases for next year, but we're also going to have like all of our product that nobody from Europe has, seen before. So like, what would you recommend for a first time, publisher attending Essen as far as like, what kind of booth setup and product line should you bring? Like obviously bring your hottest stuff, but would you say keep it conservative or
keep it conservative because so we're in the lucky position that we actually warehouse in Germany, but most companies have to fly everything in for Essen, which is insanely expensive.
Yeah.
Right. Insanely. I think a pallet, like most people getting a pallet to Essen is like $3,000 to $4,000 minimum. And like, that's just like already you're basically selling at a massive loss. Right.
Yeah.
So conservative, definitely. My thing when it comes to like going to a brand new show, you have to kind of do what we've done, show up and figure out what works. Essen's its own animal. Like we showed up to Essen last year and we tried to do what worked and we at least brought our demo tables and did that. But then we're like, okay, like we can make this show just work like an Allplay show. We just have to be aware of the sales peculiarness of it. So we have to do that. So we went with the whole Allplay shelves and it was a big, beautiful, awesome booth. People loved it. It was great. But we invested into Essen because we did feel like it was going to be worth it. And since we're going to UK Games Expo, we can use that booth setup for both places and use the same furniture. Honestly, like just show up, bring a conservative amount of product, and see what happens and then adjust for next year. Like that's what you can do is just show up and then make an adjustment for next year.
Cool. All right. More conventions, or favorite conventions or favorite things about them.
PAX Unplugged is amazing. The sales are phenomenal. The people are phenomenal. So I consider the polar opposite of conventions. I'm not going to try to dog on BGG Con. I like BGG Con just fine. But BGG Con and PAX Unplugged are the exact opposite. Sales are great. Sales are not great. People are so excited. People feel very grumpy and very like show me what you got, kind of at BGG Con. Like the attendance people of both of those shows are so diverse that and oftentimes they happen in like pretty quick succession. It's like BGG Con boom and then PAX Unplugged boom, right? And so you have BGG Con and like we'll attend and you have people coming by like grumpy all the time. And it's not everybody, it's not like the full spectrum, but that's like the vibe is like people are like, I know so much about board games. Show me why this game's good, blah, 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 blah. Or they're like, here's what's wrong with your company, blah, 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 blah. Like, cause they're just like so in their own head about how much they know about board games and how much of being a board gamer is a thing for them. And in PAX Unplugged, it's just like shiny, happy people that are like, ooh, what's this? This is so cool. Show me this game. And it's just so refreshing for people to just be like excited as opposed to like needing to be impressed. It's so different. So, I guess there's my feelings on two conventions a little bit. Again, I'm not trying to dog on BGG Con. I like going. I think it's a fun convention to attend. I just, as an exhibitor, I don't think it's a very valuable one. If you're going to go to it, I would much more prioritize a million other shows over BGG Con if you're looking to do the convention circuit. But PAX Unplugged, if you can get in, it is a need to be on your list. I think it's one of the, like, if you can't get into Gen Con, go to PAX Unplugged. It's phenomenal. Even if you live in California, right? Like it's worth the journey to like do a convention like that because it's way better than Origins in terms of the sales that you'll get and the amount of market penetration you'll get. And I just think it's very well run. It's very well organized and it's just a phenomenal show. It's fun. The food's good. Everything's great.
Yeah, speaking of the food, that's probably one of my favorite things about going to conventions is trying the local food, right? Which conventions do you feel have the best food?
Origins and PAX Unplugged have the best food, hands down. And I can find good food anywhere. It's like one of my like superpowers. But So PAX Unplugged has the Reading Terminal Market very close. It's also very
Yeah.
close to a great restaurant district, but there's
Mhm.
also Chinatown, which has phenomenal food in
Mhm.
Chinatown. Origins has the North Market, which may be one of the best food halls in all of America.
Mhm.
Everything at the North Market is phenomenal. Jenny's ice cream, people talk about going to Origins just for the Jenny's ice cream. There's
Yep.
also, it's right on the like hot area of downtown. So like you can
Mhm.
walk, you leave the convention, turn this way, and you're walking down High Street. And
Yeah.
every restaurant that you'll pass is going to be a phenomenal restaurant to eat
Mhm.
at. So like Origins and PAX Unplugged, great food.
Mhm.
Worst food that I've found so far in my experience, worst food is why am I blanking on the name? Why am I blanking on the name?
It's not
Essen.
Essen, is it? Oh,
Essen.
okay. Yeah, it is
Essen.
Essen.
I've found some good food in Essen. It's so hard. It's just, it's not great. I like the options are just have not been great for us. And
Yeah. Well,
I've
that
tried,
town basically exists as a convention center and nothing else, right? That's
which
pretty
you
much
think
the
more like
yeah.
since they're having conventions all the time, you think there'd be better restaurants around,
Yeah.
but it's just okay.
Well, that's good to hear. Yeah, Kyle and I actually went to dental school in Columbus, and like as far as Origins food goes, and that's one of the biggest cities in America for like startup indie restaurants, actually. And so you actually get a lot of food places that blow up there, and then they expand beyond, like Jenny's Ice Cream and other random restaurants. So yeah, there's a lot of good food to be found when you're attending a convention. So I think that's definitely something to look forward to outside of the board games. So
Awesome. Well, Nick, I know that you're looking to be expanding your convention presence for Bitewing Games in 2025. I know Allplay is upping its convention presence worldwide, doing some Tokyo Game Markets, doing a couple of UK Games Expo, which will be new for us. So, yeah, really excited. And again, I would encourage any publishers that have small publishers or large publishers that have questions about how to do conventions and how to do conventions better, leave some comments. We'll try to answer them as best as we can. But yeah, I've really enjoyed having this kind of like end of the year post, PAX Unplugged little interview about conventions. It's one of my favorite things as a publisher to go to is do conventions.
Yeah. I think anyone who is planning to have some kind of booth or presence at a convention really appreciates your insights, having been to so many at this point, and really making that a core part of your business model. So thank you for sharing your insights, and thanks for your time. But thank you to anyone who joined us on this topic of conventions. I'm sure we'll have many more unique topics for the coming year. But yeah, be sure to like and subscribe to this video and the Bitewing Games YouTube channel if you want to continue to hear about the bits with Joe and Nick. But until next time, thank you for joining us.